So this next question's a little bit probably easier. It's which of the new players will surprise the fans the most, you think?
Huh. I think this might seem like a cop out answer. Tobias Harris. Um, I think Tobias Harris is going to be the guy that surprises fans the most simply just because of how negatively he is seen in the NBA and how negatively he is talked about in the NBA. Like if you can go back to, the Pistons announcing that they had signed Tobias Harris or they welcome back Tobias Harris, those types of posts. Comments are full of people who might even be Pistons fans saying like, why do we bring him back? Like, what is he going to do here? He sucked in Philadelphia. Um, I don't think Tobias Harris is a negative basketball player at all. I think he is someone who is going to make a serious difference on this team. And I do think, in my estimation, like you can make an argument for Jeremy, but I think he's going to be the best vet Cade has played with by far in his career so far. And I think it's because he knows how to play with guys like Cade. Not to say Jeremy didn't, but it took them a while to kind of get a groove because it was like, is it my shot? To be fair, it was Cade's rookie year too, so there's a lot of figuring it out. I don't think there's going to be a whole process of figuring it out this year. I think Tobias Harris is a guy that really like you can plug him into the system and he's going to fit perfectly. And I think the Pistons have desperately looked for a guy resembling his archetype for years now. Since they even like had a guy like Sadiq Bey, they ultimately wanted his production to resemble that of Tobias Harris. They had a guy like Isaiah Livers last year who they were hoping to resemble a guy like Tobias Harris. Now you don't just have a guy like Tobias Harris, you have Tobias Harris on your roster who is still in his prime. It sounds ridiculous to say because Tobias Harris is prime. Like it sounds like you're making it like an all-star. He's not. But that's also not to say he's not an extremely productive NBA player. And I think a lot of what happened in Philadelphia was more so circumstantial. And I think the circumstances of the discussion around his contract, the pressure in Philly, all of that kind of weighed on him to where he wasn't really able to be like the best version of himself. And I think he was unfortunately, never going to fit the contract that he was given. He's not going to be Jimmy Butler. Like, I'm sorry. Like, at Tobias Harris's best, he's not Jimmy Butler. No, there's not a lot of Jimmy Butlers out there. That's why he's Jimmy Butler. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of hate towards Tobias Harris was misguided and misdirected. And I think Tobias Harris seems like a very nice guy, seems like an absolute sweetheart. But at the same time, you can tell he's got a serious chip on his shoulder and he has something to prove. And I think that's something that is in common with the rest of this team is like the perception of this team is so negative and it's so like in the dirt. You know what I mean? Like they have no real positivity around them. Like they're almost like a joke. Like the fact that Tobias Harris, when his contract was announced, I thought it was a pretty decent contract, 2-year, like pretty decent deal. I didn't think it was really that crazy. Was it 56 million, 2 years, 56 million?
Yeah.
In my opinion, I was expecting him to get like 2 years, 60 at minimum. Right. So I think Tobias coming here on what I view as like a discount shows that like he has something to prove. And I think this team in general kind of shares that attitude of something to prove. And I think Tobias has a lot to show. I think he's a productive NBA player. I think he'll be able to fill that role of stretch 4 wing player. And I think he's also going to be a guy that like you can rely on in serious moments where the game is on the line. You know what I mean? Like I think he's a guy that like is going to make an impact in the wins and losses column. And you haven't really had guys like that in the past. Like you had maybe a Boyan or a Burks, but like even those guys were and I'm just going to be completely frank. They were like absolute like negatives on defense. They were, if you had them guarding a player, that's a bucket. Right. Like, and it's not to say like they don't have value. They do. But when you're miscasting these guys as like, I don't know, I'd say Tobias Harris is a really solid B tier guy. In my opinion, and this isn't even like a shot or anything, but like Boyan Burks, those are like C+, like those aren't like B tier guys, but you were making them to be, and that's just not their role. So having an actual B tier guy who Tobias is not an all-world defender or anything like that, but can he guard another team's like best perimeter or like power forward player? Absolutely he can. Like he has done that actually. So I think having a guy who can do things on both sides of the ball and have that on-ball creation too, like when Cade, has to defer to someone, Tobias can get his own bucket. Boyan couldn't for most of the time. And if he did, it took up most of the shot clock. Like Tobias is someone who knows how to get buckets, knows how to distribute the ball, and I think his overall fit on this team is so seamless that I think a lot of the discourse around that contract and his signing is going to age incredibly poorly.
I do too. I think it was Jeff Teague on his podcast. He said Tobias Harris is going to cook this year because there's going to be no expectations like whatsoever. Yeah. It's like he could have a couple 30-point games and no one's going to blink an eye because it's the Pistons. Like no one's going to be paying attention to that. The reason why I didn't put Tobias in the lower third is because I watched him. I know what to expect out of him. I know what he brings. I know he's probably going to get anywhere from 17, 19 points a game, 7 rebounds, good efficiency, just make good sound decisions, not make a whole lot of mental mistakes. And to your point, I think the Pistons were looking for a forward like Tobias, to your point. They tried to make Zariq into that, and obviously that just was not his game whatsoever. They tried it with Isaiah Livers. That didn't work. Isaiah Stewart, they kind of experimented with it, him trying to be like a, stretch four when there's more layers to his game. But for me, I think the one player I think will surprise a lot of people is Paul Reed. Watched a lot of Philly games last year. Don't know why. Maybe because I just needed a new, I don't want to say a new team, but I wanted to watch some like good basketball, some ball movement.
Not depressing basketball. Yeah.
Yeah, not depressing basketball. I'm still a Piston fan, but
yeah.
Paul Reed like really surprised me. I was just like, wow, like Philly has a guy that is a backup center, is putting up, borderline starting center stats while Embiid was out, who's protecting the rim. He could stretch the floor a little bit, play make. And I know for a fact, man, like he is probably going to be a media darling because I don't know if you've listened to some of his podcasts before.
No, I have. Yeah.
Bro, he's hilarious.
Yeah.
He's funny as hell.
I'm very much looking forward to talking to him for sure.
But yeah, I think to me, he's probably going to surprise some fans. Some fans know like how good he is. I think Tobias, I just know he's a consistent player. I don't think it would surprise me. But to your point, yeah, I mean, that's something we haven't really had, like a power forward that can score at all 3 levels, is a plus defender. No knock at Boyan, but he was a traffic cone, if we're being honest, at that stage of his career. But I mean, overall, I think all the players will surprise some fans. I think, Malik Beasley shooting high volume from 3. He's already kind of, told Detroit fans, hey, I want to bring that Detroit basketball energy back. I think Tim Hardaway Jr., when he gets hot, man, like, watch out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thug shake that Malik Beasley does also is going to catch on pretty fast here if the team starts winning games.
Oh, man, if he does that hit like a big-time 3 and the game's close, LCA would just, like, erupt.
Because, I mean, honestly, like, I feel like Malik Beasley is also like a great pick. Like I think he's going to be someone that like fans, I don't think necessarily had like a lot of fanfare for like when he got signed this summer. He's always been because and I'm sure you have this too, like you always have guys in the league that like you have like your favorite role players. Malik Beasley for like pretty much his entire career since like Denver has been one of my favorite role players to watch in the league just because I like how he plays and I like the energy he has in the game. So I think he's also going to be one of those guys that like I think would find himself as a fan favorite and find himself being someone that like the team looks for in important moments too.